Ma'am, do we start now?
Yes, Tumpa. Please go ahead.
Do we wait for some of us? No, we can start.
Do you want to wait for some of the students to join? Then there's still 2 minutes left. 2-3 minutes left. We could wait.
Okay. Okay, ma'am, we'll start
Yes,
at 8 then.
right. On the
At
dot.
8 p.m. Yes.
Shall I make arrangements for? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Hello?
Hello. Yes, yes. I can hear you. I think others can hear you too.
Okay. Shall I organize for the PPT?
Yes. I mean, or just wait sharp at 8 p.m. we'll start. Just wait for a minute. Please wait for a minute.
Okay.
Ma'am, do we start now?
Yes, Tumpa.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. A very good evening, respected principal madam, all my colleagues and my dear students. Today we have with us Dr. Sudarshana Sen, assistant professor in sociology, University of Gorbongo, Malda. She's going to deliver a lecture on orientation to post-classical theories. Before I invite her to speak, I would request our Honorable Principal Madam, Dr. Ajanta Paul, to deliver the welcome address. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you very much, Tumpa, Dr. Tumpa Mukherjee. Good evening. It's my pleasure and privilege to welcome all of you to this to this special online lecture of the Department of Sociology in the college. I especially welcome Dr. Sudarshana Sen, who is, as we have already heard, assistant professor in sociology, Gorbongo University, Malda, West Bengal. And Dr. Sen is no stranger to the college. She has been with us on earlier occasions, has enlightened us and our students, and we are really indebted to her. Thank you, Dr. Sen, for gracing the occasion, for being here with us this evening. I'm sure the students and faculty members are really looking ahead to your lecture. It is going to be on post-classical theories, which I'm sure is a very important and interesting area of this course, and is also a component of the Calcutta University syllabus for our students. So they have a lot to take away from this evening session, for which you are the resource person. I welcome our faculty members, those from the Department of Sociology, and if anybody else has joined from the staff room. I also welcome our beloved students for whose enrichment this program, as indeed most other programs, are duly organized in the college. I end my brief welcome speech by wishing this program, this special lecture, all success. And I also place on record my gratitude to the Department of Sociology for organizing this particular talk, and I hope that there will be more occasions in the future when Dr. Sen will be with us and our students. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, madam. As always, we remain thankful to you for your guidance. Now, a brief note on Dr. Sudarshana Sen. Dr. Sen is serving as Assistant Professor in Sociology, University of Gaurbongo, Malda, West Bengal. Her areas of research interest include women's studies, gender studies, sociology of health, and research methodologies. She has done her doctoral studies on Anglo-Indian women from the School of Women's Studies, Jadavpur University. Later on, she published her doctoral study work in form of a book, which was published by Palgrave Macmillan, and the name of the book is Anglo-Indian Women in Transition: Pride, Prejudice, and Predicament. She has presented innumerable papers at national and international seminars. Her articles have been published in noted social science journals such as Sociological Bulletin, Social Scientist, EPW, etc. On behalf of the Department of Sociology, Women's Christian College, I invite you to deliver today's lecture on orientation to post-classical theories. Over to you, Dr. Sen.
Thank you. First of all, I thank the principal, Olundadi, for this invitation to deliver a lecture on post-colonialism. And I also thank my friend and junior colleague, Dr. Tumpa Mukherjee, and the other members of the faculty of the Department of Sociology of the college for thinking of me efficient enough to deliver a lecture on the topic. And I welcome all students present here because this is a topic which is not very common and also not very simple to understand. I hope the students will like the way I try to deliver the topic to them, and it will be a pleasure for me if they find it helpful. I would request students to listen to the lecture and question me after I complete. Now, I would like to present a PowerPoint presentation in order to give a framework to what I will be delivering in my lecture. So please give me a minute so that I can present this. Yes. Now I would request can you see it? Is it visible? Is this visible?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Please excuse me. I would like to stop my video because both together will cause some problem because the internet connection is not very good here. Now, is it visible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I would start with a question. What is post-colonialism? Post-colonialism is a critical academic study of the cultural, political, and economic legacy of colonialism and imperialism, focusing on the impact of human control and exploitation of the colonized people and their lands. More specifically, it is a critical theory analysis of history, culture, literature, and discourse of imperial power. As an epistemology, that is the study of knowledge, its nature and variability, ethics, and as political science, the field of post-colonialism addresses the matters that constitute the post-colonial identity of a decolonized people which derives from, number one, the colonizer's generation of cultural knowledge about colonized people. Number two, how that Western cultural knowledge was applied to subjugate a non European people into a colony of the European mother country, which after initial invasion was effected by means of cultural identities of the colonizer and the colonized. So, post colonialism is aimed at disempowering such theories by means of which colonialists perceive, understand, and know the world. Post colonial theory thus establishes intellectual spaces for subaltern people to speak for themselves in their own voices and thus produce cultural discourses of philosophy, language, society, and economy, balancing the imbalanced us and them binary power relationship between the colonists and the colonial subjects. Now, what did I mean by this? By the word post-colonialism, I see that it is a hyphenated word and I've put an oblique after that, and I've stated that it can also be pronounced as post-colonialism as a single word. Now, by this, I mean the multiple political, economic, cultural, and philosophical responses to colonialism from its inauguration to the present day. What do we mean by this? This means that colonialism is a greater world of politics, of a special kind of administration, and post-colonialism is something which comes after colonialism. And it also means that post-colonialism is an approach that can analyze colonialism from its beginning and how it has decayed over years. Now here I come to the different meanings that the different terms of post-colonialism can mean. One is a hyphenated word, one is a single word, and the third one is something which is different. Now, colonialism was presented as the extension of civilization which ideologically justified the self-ascribed racial and cultural superiority of the Western world over the non-Western world. Post-colonialism refers to wider multifaceted effects and implications of colonial rule. Colonialism is direct seizing of control, a political and economic project, a larger discourse of hegemony and superiority that supports concrete political act. It is different from the term imperialism. Colonialism is one active manifestation of imperialist ideology, but imperialism is a larger structure of economic and political hegemony that does not include direct rule and conquest of another country. Now here I have used three different ways in which post-colonialism can be understood. Post-colonialism is a historical period following the end of colonial rule. I've just said that. Post-colonialism as a single term signifies events that succeeded its beginning and the aftermath, And when I say post-oblique colonialism, it stresses the presence of the colonial with the post-colonial critique. Now, what is colonialism? If we understand what colonialism is, we will be able to understand what is post-colonialism. Colonialism is a larger discourse of hegemony and superiority that is enlisted to drive and support concrete political act. Now, India was a colony of the British for many years, and we have gained independence from the British in 1947. We know that. In that way, India is a post-colonial society. And we can study Indian society as a subject of post-colonialism because it has been a colony. And I have just said that colonies were established by Western powers in the lands of the East. So colonialism involves a concrete act of conquest. So there must be some conquest by the Western countries over the non-Western countries, and this is what colonialism is. Now, post-colonial thought is wide-ranging. Thinkers have distinguished between post-colonial post-colonial from post-colonial, arguing that the removal of the hyphen designates a shift in the meaning. It is widely agreed that post-colonial, post-colonial names a distinct historical period following the end of direct colonial rule. Post-colonialism also names the period of colonial rule together with its gradual weakening and demise. So post-colonialism encompasses a wide variety of approaches, and theoreticians may not always agree on a common set of definition. On a simple level, through anthropological study, it may seek to build a better understanding of colonial life based on the assumption that the colonial rulers are unreliable narrators from the point of view of the colonized people. What do I mean by this? When we think of caste as students of sociology, we know that caste was defined by the colonial administrators in a particular way, which was later on defied by sociologists of independent India. For example, G.S. Ghurye or M.N. Srinivas had a different view of caste, what it is and what it can be defined as, from how colonial administrators had defined caste. So this is an example of what we mean by the assumption that colonial rulers were unreliable narrators. And this nomenclature of unreliable narrators was from the point of view of the colonized. On a deeper level, post-colonialism examines the social and political power relationships that sustain colonialism and neo-colonialism, including the social, political, and cultural narratives surrounding the colonizer and the colonized. Now, when I talk about social and political power relationships that sustain colonialism and neo-colonialism, what I mean is there were certain cultural narratives that were ascribed to the colonizer and the colonized. So the colonizer, for example, if I take an example from India, from our own Kolkata city, we will see that the colonizer had inherited or inhabited a particular space in the Kolkata city, and the colonized were never allowed to enter that space. So there were certain narratives, certain stories that surrounded the living arrangements of the colonizer and the colonized. This is one slice of what the narratives were. This approach may overlap with studies of contemporary history and may also draw examples from anthropology, historiography, political science, philosophy, sociology, and human geography. Subdisciplines of post-colonial studies examine the effects of colonial rule on the practice of feminism, anarchism, literature, and Christian thought. Now, post-colonialism as a term, I said, is not a simple one. It has deeper meanings and it has different approaches in which post-colonial studies have emerged and advanced. Now, there are two main strands that has developed in post-colonial studies. One is developed by Karl Marx and the other by Levinas. Marx condemned the subjugation and economic exploitation of the underclass that the colonial system demands. Marx's position on colonialism at times seems very contradictory. He succeeds in both condemning the exploitation associated with the profit the British made from these colonies and also stressed the success of an economic venture that anti-colonialists at the time wanted to deny. Levinas never directly confronted the question of colonialism, but his work points out to his revulsion for totalitarianism and imperialist expansion over the marginalized and the oppressed. These two strands of thought have encouraged multiple ways in which post-colonial theory or post-colonial studies have developed in near past. Now, post-colonial theory holds that decolonized people develop a post-colonial identity. Decolonized people, people who are not have independently come out of being colonized. They have developed a post-colonial identity that is based on cultural interactions between different identities, which are assigned varying degrees of social power by the colonial society. In post-colonial literature, the anti-conquest narrative analyzes the identity politics that are the social and cultural perspectives of the subaltern colonial subjects, their creative resistance to the culture of the colonizer, how such cultural resistance complicated the establishment of a colonial society, how the colonizers developed their post-colonial identity, and how neo-colonialism actively employed the us and them binary social relation to view the non-Western world as inhabited by the other. So the Western thinkers thought of this non-Western world as the other. The different aspirations, different identities, different culture of the non-Western world was a factor in the Western mind to divide themselves from these non-Western people. As an example, consider how new colonial discourse of geopolitical homogeneity often includes the relegating of decolonized people, their culture, their countries, to an imaginary place, the third world. So the third world is a term that encompasses all kinds of decolonized people, their culture, their countries into a homogeneous one. Oftentimes, the term the third world is over inclusive. It refers vaguely to large geographic areas comprising several continents and seas, for example, Africa, Asia, Latin America, Oceania. Rather than providing a clear or complete description of the area, it supposedly refers to it instead erases distinctions and identities of the groups it claims to represent. A post colonial critique of this term would analyze the self justifying usage of such a term, the discourse it occurs within, as well as the philosophical and political functions the language may have. Post colonial critiques of homogeneous concepts such as Arabs, First World, often aim to show how such language actually does not represent groups supposedly identified. Such terminology often fails to adequately describe the heterogeneous people, their cultures and geography that make them up. Accurate descriptions of the world's peoples, places, things require nuanced and accurate terms. By including everyone under the umbrella term Third World, it ignores why those regions or countries are called Third World and who is responsible for that. Now, defining what post-colonialism is, I think now it is clear that what it means and how far difficult it is to explain post-colonialism in a single sentence. Now I would like to give you a glimpse of what post-colonial studies are and who are considered to be post-colonial theorists in social science. The first that I would like to talk about is Frantz Fanon. He analyzes and medically describes the nature of colonialism as essentially destructive. Its societal effects, the imposition of a subjugated colonial identity, is harmful to the mental health of the native people who are subjugated into colonies. Fanon writes that the ideological essence of colonialism is the systematic denial of all attributes of humanity of the colonized people. Such dehumanization is achieved with physical and mental violence, by which the colonist means to inculcate a servile mentality upon the natives. I'll give you a very brief outline of the post-colonial theorists. Now I move on to Edward Said. In his book, published in 1978, called Orientalism, he describes the us and them, the binary social relation in which Western Europe intellectually divides the world into the Occident and the Orient, the Western and the Eastern, the Western and the non-Western. Said developed the denotations and connotations of the term Orientalism. Said's concept is that the cultural representations generated with the us and them binary relation are social constructions, which are mutually constitutive and cannot exist independent of each other because each exists on account of and for the other. Now, after Edward Said, I move on to Gayatri Spivak, one of the well-known speakers of our times. Spivak cautioned against assigning an over-broad connotation. Spivak cautioned against ignoring subaltern people as cultural others and said that the West could progress beyond colonial perspective by means of introspective self-criticism of the basic ideas and investigate methods that establish a culturally superior West studying the culturally inferior non-Western people. Now, the next theorist, Homi Bhabha, In The Location of Culture, published in 1994, Homi Bhabha argues that viewing the human world as composed of separate and unequal cultures rather than as an integral human world perpetuates the belief in the existence of imaginary people and places. To counter such linguistic and sociological reductionism, such as third world, second world, first world, post-colonial praxis establishes the philosophic value of hybrid intellectual spaces wherein ambiguity abrogates truth and authenticity, thereby hybridity is the philosophic condition that most substantively challenges the ideological validity of colonialism. I move on to the next. R. Shivakumar. In his catalogue essay, R. Shivakumar introduced the term contextual modernism, which later emerged as a post-colonial critical tool in the understanding of Indian art, specifically the works of Nandalal Bose, Rabindranath Tagore, Ramkinkar Bej, and Binod Bihari Mukherjee. Shantiniketan artists did not believe that to be indigenous, one has to be historicist, either in theme or in style, and similarity to be modern, one has to adopt a particular transnational formal language or technique. Modernism to them was neither a style nor a form of internationalism. It was critical re-engagement with the foundational aspects of art necessitated by changes in one's unique historical position. In the post-colonial history of art, this marked the departure from Eurocentric unilateral ideas of modernism to alternative context-sensitive modernism. The brief survey of the individual works of the core Shantiniketan artists and the thought perspectives they open up makes clear that though there were various contact points in the work, they were not bound by continuity of style but by a community of ideas, which they not only shared but also interpreted and carried forward. Thus, they do not represent a school but a movement. Now, I move on to the next theorist, Dipesh Chakraborty. In his book Provincializing Europe, published in 2000, Dipesh Chakraborty charts the subaltern history of the Indian struggle for independence and counters Eurocentric Western scholarship about non-Western people and culture by proposing that Western Europe simply be considered as culturally equal to the other cultures of the world, that is, as one region among many in human geography. Now, with that, I give you a glimpse of the Marxian ideology and how it has developed, it has been developed by others other than Marx, Anthony Gramsci and Ranjit Guha. I have also given you a glimpse of what the other ways of looking at post-colonialism and post-colonial societies can be. Levinasian ethics is one I just explained, and this is the book written in italics that give you a summary of what Levinas has thought about. And these are the substantial works on post-colonialism. Here you can find books by Frantz Fanon, by Gayatri Spivak, Edward Said, and I've also given you dates to understand how post-colonialism is spread over the studies of post-colonialism has a spread from 1924 to 1988. That not to say that it has stopped being studied. So that's it. That's what I had to say. Over to you, Dr. Mukherjee, and I would like to have questions from students.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sen, for your insightful, informative lecture. I would request if any student have any questions, they can ask Sudarshanadi.
Students can ask any question. If they want to know spelling of any theorist, I can also say that. Because I understand it's very difficult to come to terms with the very intricate and complex idea of postmodernism on being online. It's very difficult, but given the situation, we have no other option, but I'm always welcome to field questions from students.
আচ্ছা আমার একটা কথা বলো, this so you spoke about colonialism, post colonialism. Post classical theory বলতে exactly কি mean করে?
Post classical includes modern and advanced theories.
যেরকম Frankfurt School, critical theory এইসব তো?
Not only that, postmodernism also comes under advanced theories. Post-structuralism, post-colonialism comes under this advanced theories.
মানে তুমি একটু জেনারেলি একটু বলে দেবে, মানে ওই কি বললে তুমি পোস্ট স্ট্রাকচারালিজমের ব্যাপারে একটু যদি মানে কি বলে সিনপটিক ওয়েতে বাচ্চাদের বলে দাও।
মানে পোস্ট ক্লাসিক্যাল,
হ্যাঁ পোস্ট ক্লাসিক্যাল।
Now, in order to understand what post-classical is, we need to understand what classical means. Classical means those theories or approaches that are original. For example, if I take functionalism talked about society as an organism which evolved from the simple to the complex. It talked about how a simple society evolves into a complex society through maintaining integration. So it talked about a kind of relationship, integrative relationship between individual and society. So this was an original idea. It was not an interpretation or a meaning to anything that was talked about earlier. It was original in its essence. So all theories, those were original in their understanding of the relationship between individual and society, can be termed as classical. So what are the theories that can be termed as classical? There are two very important theories. One talked about the integrative relationship between individual and society, and the second talked about the conflicting relationship between individual and society. One talked about integration, one talked about destruction. So one was functionalist theory, the other was the conflict theory. These were the two important classical theories. And the theorists, the classical theorists who had contributed to the formation of these classical theories were Koth, Spencer, Durkheim, Weber, Marx. So whenever we talk about classical thinkers, we would think of the kind of ideas that they generated. So those can be termed under classical theory. So what caused classical theories to break down into modern theories? Modern theories were not modern in the sense that they came in modern times. classical theories were also part of modern times, but they were original. Modern theories were an interpretation and a way further from the classical theory. So when Mead questioned the relationship between individual and society as marked by classical theories as determination theories, or meaning that individuals' lives were determined by the society. The classical theories did not give importance to the individual. Symbolic interactionism questioned that and took it further by giving more importance to individual than to the society. They talked about freedom, and they took up a debate of which is more important, determinism or freedom. So that is where we can term modern theories, which were far classical in terms of their originality. They were not first, built upon those interpretations, their own something. So the modern theorists talked about how individuals constructed the idea of society. And from there on, we find different strands of thought taken from various disciplines starting to influence sociological theory. For example, phenomenology, ethnomethodology, they were influenced by other strands in other disciplines in philosophy. So they were influenced by these thinkers other than sociologists and tried to question classical theories, take from them and build upon it their own theorizations. So that was modern. Symbolic interactionism, exchange theory, phenomenology, ethnomethodology, all were modern theories. They were original, but not as original as theories developed by Koth, Spencer, Durkheim, Marx, Weber. Now, after that, sociology faced a crisis. It was in 1980s when, at the mid of 1980s, when sociology faced a crisis that was very important. Why? Because there were criticisms against the way sociology built up their own theorizing. Many criticized it as devoid of any reality in their way of interpretation. So that is where social theory became more important way of looking at relationship between individual and society than the sociological way of theorizing. So therefrom, advanced social theory took up the reins of explaining how to understand the relationship between individual and society. Is it only determinism, or is it only freedom, or is it both? So from there on, we find that whatever sociology was talking about society, that is, it viewed society as a system, it viewed society as a structure, it viewed society as a whole, a relationship between whole and part. All these kind of theorizings were put to question, because the other theorists in other disciplines started to look at other systems, other structures as a whole. For example, Althusser did, Levi-Strauss did. They took up language, language as a system. They took up language structure, kinship as a system, kinship as a structure. And they started to analyze how a structure or a system persists, how it gains, how in its evolutionary change, how the structure becomes important, not the process of change. They were talking exactly what sociology did talk about society. But they took up a different thing as a structure. It was not only society, but a different aspect of society, which could also be termed as a structure or a system. So these strands of thought from other disciplines started to influence the discourse on the relationship between individual and society. So when these other discourses became important, sociology faced a crisis and could not defend its position for a long time. It was Anthony Giddens who started to extend the other sociologists after Giddens. For example, name. Okay, I'll come back to that. It was Giddens. What is the name of the theorist who started the term habitus? What was his name? It started with B. Now the name is not coming. Who was the theorist who started the name term habitus?
Oh, it's the Pierre Bourdieu. Pronunciation ta theek hoy na amar.
So Giddens and Bourdieu started to defend sociology and give sociology a status of a meta narrative. So that is how sociological understanding of society started to again come up in the dominant discourse. So we have divided this evolution of sociological theory into three parts: the classical, the modern, and the advanced. I hope I'm clear.
Students, if you have any question related to this topic, please ask her. Does anyone of you have any question? It implies, either implies they have understood everything or they have not understood anything. I will assume they have understood everything.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, could you suggest a material to refer to it?
To post-colonialism, there is no one. There is no one material. If you want to get into what post-colonial study is, there are certain very, I would say, reader-type books available in the market from good publishers. You can take recourse of those. There are certain handbooks available also. You can avail those, or if you want to study post-colonialism further, you have to take up the thinkers separately.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Anybody else has any question? If you have any question, please ask her. Nobody has any question.
That means they have not understood.
Or they have understood totally. I will take it that they have understood everything. আর একটা বলো পোস্ট ক্লাসিক্যাল থিওরিরও সেভাবে একটা কোনো বই নেই,
None.
nothing as such, which is very difficult for the students actually.
You can give them Ritzer. Ritzer has 2 volumes of a book on sociological theory, classical and modern. You'll get a part of advanced in the modern, in the volume that is on modern.
But the way their syllabus is structured, it is not like that in Ritzer. And for them, for students, they want, the ready-made puro thakbe ek jayagaয়.
They want a note type thing. But that is not the way you should study honors papers, okay? I will not suggest such things to students because it's important to study each book.
Actually, they don't get time also. The semester term, it's just for 3.5 months. Within that month, 3-4 months to cover the entire syllabus and to everything, they also don't get time for an in-depth study in that sense.
Actually, semester system is constructed or formed for those students who are studious, who study every day. Without that, it is difficult to cope up with.
Anyway, if you don't have any question, then I'll ask my colleague Pritasha Banerjee to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Tumpadi. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. It is my privilege to propose a vote of thanks speech and acknowledge the contribution of everyone behind today's special lecture. I, Pritasha Banerjee, on behalf of the Department of Sociology, extend my most sincere gratitude to our respected Principal Madam, Dr. Ajanta Paul, for always being the catalyst and stimulating us to do our best and standing as our pillars of strength. I extend my deepest gratitude to our invited guest speaker, Dr. Sudarshana Sen, who spared time from her busiest schedule and gifted us an insightful and pertinent lecture. I am thankful to Dr. Tumpa Mukherjee, Head, Department of Sociology, for her constant support, Ms. Shathi Nayak and Amreen Sarfaraz for their technical assistance and support. I am thankful to everyone who contributed for the successful completion of the program. I am equally thankful to our dear students for their participation in today's session. Thank you.
We are thankful to Pritasha Banerjee, a departmental faculty member, for giving the vote of thanks and being constantly supporting us as we organize different programs for our students. In fact, my entire department, I'm very thankful to all of you. Shathi Nayak, Pritasha Banerjee, Amreen Sarfaraz, and to all our students. Thank you so much.
Thank you for giving a good time to me too, and the students for lending an ear. Thank you to all of you, and hope to meet you someday in person.
Yes. Hopefully we meet again.
Yes, we do.
Thank you so much. So we are leaving, okay?
Okay, thank you.
You're most welcome.